Amidst a shower of blood and debris, a brutal figure crushes the remains of a massive creature while counting up to exactly 300 kills. The boy realizes he miscounted and corrects himself to 301, chuckling with satisfaction as he looks over the mountain of corpses he piled up today. Sitting alone on the gruesome battlefield, the young demon looks up with a hopeful expression and wonders aloud if everyone will be happy with his hard work. The scene shifts to a quiet street where a small, hooded figure stands silently looking up at a brick building with a sign that reads Aaron's Bakery. He takes a moment to psyche himself up outside the door before nervously entering the shop, even though the sign clearly indicates that the business is closed. Inside the bakery, the woman working there turns around in surprise when she hears a timid voice call out to her from the front of the store. Peeking just over the edge of the counter, the small child looks at her with desperate eyes and asks if she would be willing to let him work there. The baker places her hands on her hips and bluntly refuses the request, stating that it is impossible for her to hire him simply because he is obviously a monster. Trembling with nervousness, stammers out his name and tries to convince her by insisting that he is confident in his physical strength. While the television broadcasts news about the ongoing Great War, the woman explains that this is actually the busiest time for her shop to be open. The baker explains that having a monster in the store would scare customers away, and she simply cannot afford to let her business suffer because of that. Meekly suggests working out of sight in the back, but the woman coldly shuts him down by stating she has no budget to hire someone like him. He walks away dejected as she tells him to try his luck elsewhere, the door clicking shut behind him to mark the finality of her rejection. The goblin child clenches his fists in frustration, lamenting that he has failed yet again and losing track of exactly how many times he has been turned away. He is currently wandering through the royal capital, a city located in the neutral zone where humans and monsters are supposedly able to live together in harmony. Stands amidst a crowd of humans cheering excitedly at a shop window display, reflecting on how he arrived here a week ago in search of a place to live. The screens broadcast the nationwide festival to elect the next hero, causing the women in the crowd to swoon over the candidate on screen and pledge their votes to him. He scoffs at the absurdity of choosing a hero based on facial appearance, noting that this election seems to be the reason why the public sentiment toward monsters has become so harsh lately. Clutches his empty, growling stomach while wandering down the sidewalk, worrying about what he should do now that he still hasn't found a home or a job. Sneer and snicker openly as the small hooded figure walks past them, making their disgust for the monster child painfully obvious. The goblin child realizes with dread that at this rate he is simply going to starve to death. Slaps his own cheeks to force himself to switch gears and stay positive, but in his haste, he accidentally bumps into a stranger. 3 large men loom over him with intimidating expressions, letting out an annoyed grunt at the sudden impact. He freezes in terror as the thug looks down and aggressively asks where the hell the damn brat is looking while walking. The boy stammers out a desperate apology, but the men shout that they are participants in the election and demand to know what he will do if they are injured before their duel. One of the bullies notices the small horns and realizes he is a goblin, sneering that a monster has some nerve walking around the town in broad daylight. The man wearing glasses turns to his companions to propose a sinister idea. He adjusts his spectacles and suggests with a cruel smile that since their target is just a monster, there would be no problem if they hurt him a little. The other 2 thugs look at each other and grin wickedly, silently agreeing with the malicious plan. Trembling with fear, is cornered by the group as they demand he come with them for a moment. The thugs look down at the battered child with disdain, complaining that he is stingy and doesn't possess any money at all. As the group walks away laughing, one of them warns to take this beating as a lesson and get out of town immediately. Left alone on the pavement, the boy manages a weak cough and a faint laugh while trying to endure the pain. Looking up at the narrow strip of sky between the buildings, he recalls being told that humans are beings who support each other to survive. Extends his hand slightly and thinks to himself that he really wanted to live that kind of life too. However, the reality of his situation is far too difficult, and his stomach growls loudly to remind him of his intense hunger. A small white dog suddenly appears over his head, holding a bun firmly in its mouth and making a muffled noise. The goblin stares up in confusion, wondering if that is and questioning why there is bread right in front of him. The dog abruptly opens its mouth and drops the pastry directly onto the boy's face with a soft thud. Sits up clutching the bread and asks if he can really have it, to which the animal replies with a happy bark. Blushes with embarrassment as his empty stomach lets out a massive and undeniable growl. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the boy bursts into tears and thanks the dog profusely for the unexpected gift. Just as he tells the dog that it is the first creature to show him kindness in this entire country, a familiar voice gasps behind him. The baker woman arrives panting heavily and immediately accuses him of training the dog to steal bread from her shop. She grips her broom tight and calls him shameless, threatening to drag both the brat and the animal to the city guards. Although she momentarily considers that the boy and dog might be strangers, she shouts him down as a liar anyway. She demands to know why the dog would give the bread specifically to him if they really aren't working together. Trembles as he holds out the bread to return it, telling her that she can hand him over to the authorities if she must. He begs her to spare the dog from punishment, willing to take the fall completely on his own. The baker is taken aback by his selflessness, finding it incredibly suspicious that he would protect an animal he claims to have no connection with. Clutches his head in desperation, insisting that he is telling the absolute truth despite how suspicious the situation looks. The goblin child tears up as he explains that he cannot betray the dog because it is a kind creature that showed him mercy by giving him bread. The woman turns her back to him, acknowledging his sentiment but coldly reminding him that from the perspective of her shop, the animal is still just a thief. He holds the stolen food up to her and admits he knows fully well that stealing is wrong, begging to be allowed to make amends in the dog's place. Overwhelmed by his own helplessness and hunger, the boy bows his head and begins to sob uncontrollably on the pavement. Seeing his genuine distress, the baker sighs with resignation and lowers her broom, telling him that that is enough scolding for now. She looks away with a conflicted expression, realizing that she cannot bring herself to punish a starving child and a dog. Thinking it over calmly, the woman admits that the idea of him training a dog to steal is actually quite ridiculous and tells him he can do whatever he likes with the bread. However, she immediately snaps back to a stern demeanor, shouting that if he ever tries something like this again, she will hand him over to the guards without question. And the dog both flinch in terror as she yells at them to remember her warning, prompting the boy to scream a heartfelt apology. Wipes his tears away and tells the dog that it was very close to getting caught because of him. He gently pets the animal on the head and offers a sincere thank you for the help. The quiet moment is suddenly interrupted by a loud and angry voice shouting from the main street. Freezes in place when he recognizes the voice of the baker and wonders what is happening. The white dog suddenly barks and dashes away toward the commotion before the boy can stop it. He nervously peeks around the corner of the alleyway to see what is causing all the noise outside. The baker stands her ground with a broom in hand and yells at a group of men to stop what they are doing. One of the thugs steps on her employee while complaining that the bread is not tasty enough and ignoring her threat to call the guards. Recognizes the men from earlier as the leader arrogantly claims that election participants are allowed to eat and drink for free at any shop. He insults her establishment by calling it a cheap shop and declares that he would never come to a place like this if it were not for the free food. The man with glasses smirks arrogantly and claims she should actually be happy because her shop will become famous for being visited by a future hero. Crushed under the thug's boot, the shop employee mutters in pain while questioning the validity of someone calling themselves a hero while acting this way. The baker swings her broom furiously at the intruders and shouts that she absolutely refuses to serve people like them in her establishment. Her weapon is rendered useless in an instant as the bristles of the broom are sliced clean off by a swift and unseen attack. Holding a stolen baguette, the bespectacled man shrugs and remarks that since the country decided on this election, there is nothing she can do to stop them. He takes a large bite of the bread and coldly declares that weak people exist solely to be eaten and crushed by the strong. The small white dog bares its teeth and lets out a low, threatening growl to warn the men not to touch anything belonging to the shop. The woman looks over her shoulder in shock, realizing that the animal she just accused of stealing is now standing up to protect her. With a powerful push from its hind legs, the dog launches itself into the air to strike back at the bullies before they can react. Gasps as the dog crashes into the breadbasket and causes chaos, shocked that the creature is fighting for the sake of someone else yet again. Looks down at the fallen bread and reflects that he came to this city seeking a peaceful life rather than one filled with violence and conflict. He hides his face in his hood while thinking that he hates witnessing brutality more than anything else. The baker watches in shock as the small dog bites the thug's arm, realizing the animal is fighting for her despite having just received food. Peeking out from behind a wall, the goblin child questions if he is really going to just stand there and watch without doing anything. The man with glasses yells that the animal is annoying and brutally kicks the dog away with full force. Remembers his purpose for coming here and dashes out from his hiding spot to intercept the flying animal. He catches the dog in his arms just in time but skids painfully across the stone pavement from the momentum. The three men point and laugh hysterically at him, mocking the boy for looking so lame while trying to save a stray dog. The baker and the thugs fall silent in surprise as the small hooded figure slowly stands up to face them. Trembling with fear yet standing his ground, clutches the dog tightly and pleads with the men to stop their cruelty. One of the thugs looms over the cowering pair and sneers, asking if the goblin child is still eager to take another beating. Gently places a hand on the trembling dog and quietly explains that he was taught from a young age never to do things that people hate. The boy shouts with sudden intensity that unlike these cruel men, the dog definitely did not act out of a desire to mock or ridicule anyone. The gang members simply laugh at his outburst, wondering what nonsense he is spouting and deciding that they need to educate him with more violence. The large man cracks his knuckles and prepares to attack, repeating his earlier philosophy that the weak exist solely to be crushed by the strong. He throws a massive punch with all his might, but he is left in total shock when the small goblin dodges the blow with incredible speed. Slips past the massive arm in the blink of an eye, moving so fast that his attacker is unable to track his movements at all. He declares that he has been taught other lessons as well, leaping into action while the baker and the thugs watch in stunned silence. The boy grabs onto a nearby and swings swiftly around it, recalling the words he was told about how humans live by helping one another. The men look around in panic and confusion, shouting to each other that the goblin has seemingly vanished into thin air. Descends from above with incredible speed, driving his fist into the face of the large thug who was tormenting the shop employee. The impact sends the massive man flying through the air, while the small goblin lands gracefully on top of the unconscious worker. The baker stares in utter disbelief at the goblin's strength as he quietly mutters the thug's own philosophy about weak people being crushed. The leader of the group falls back in terror, screaming at the boy to stay away while asks if being crushed means he accepts being eaten. He unleashes a terrifying punch that misses the man's face by inches and smashes into the brick wall, demanding to know if the thug accepts his fate. With his fist still buried in the crumbling wall, stares down the trembling man and asks if he would be satisfied with being destroyed by someone stronger. The boy pulls his hand back and fiercely declares that he was also taught never to mock or laugh at others no matter what. He recalls the cruel laughter of the men from earlier and tells them that there is one more important lesson he learned. Clasps his hands together with a serious expression and lectures the terrified group that they must never do things that others hate. The bakery employee sits up in confusion as the thugs flee, leaving both him and the woman completely stunned by what just happened. Looks down with a melancholy expression, murmuring that while he has heard that goblins are supposed to stay in packs, he realizes that he is just a monster after all. The boy turns his head slightly to look back at the shop owner and offers a quiet word of thanks. The bakery employee smiles through his injuries and tells the child that he was saved thanks to his intervention. The woman scratches her head in an awkward manner and admits that she supposes she should thank him as well. He blushes slightly and sincerely thanks her for stepping in to help him during the confrontation. As the boy begins to walk away, the woman watches him leave while her employee pets the sleeping dog and remarks that the child seems like he will be okay. She looks down at the bread left in her hands, recalling his request to please let the animal eat it once it wakes up. The baker calls out to him one last time, stating that she would prefer if he took care of the dog until it healed, but then asks what he intends to do with himself. Smiles with his eyes closed and tells her not to worry about him, noting that it would be bad for her business to be seen with a monster at a time like this. The small figure excuses himself politely and waves goodbye to the stunned humans as he disappears down the city street. The baker watches him go and smiles softly, remarking to her employee that is quite a good-natured child for a monster. A young girl in an elaborate dress shouts happily from a balcony above, proclaiming that the goblin is cute and identifying him as. She spreads her arms wide and announces to the crowd that the election committee has an update, promising immense wealth and honor to whoever wins the hero election. The girl points directly at walking down the street below and excitedly encourages him to win the tournament and become the hero. He stops in his tracks and looks up in confusion as the girl declares that she is the official ambassador for the hero election. The goblin shakes his head firmly and states that he has absolutely no interest in wealth or fame. He clutches his fists tightly and vows with fierce determination that he will definitely secure a peaceful life for himself instead. A dark-haired young man appears in the alleyway and calls out to the boy, stopping him just as he turns a corner. Looks up in surprise as the stranger comments that he heard the boy say he intends to win the election. The mysterious man smirks slightly and asks if is a participant, noting that it is interesting to see a monster who desires a peaceful world after going through so many encounters. The baker woman looks at her assistant and remarks that despite being a monster, the boy is actually quite a good-natured child. High above the street, a girl acting as the election ambassador spots him from a balcony, calling him cute and pointing him out to the crowd. She spreads her arms wide and loudly proclaims that whoever wins the tournament will be granted vast wealth, honor, and the power of a hero. The energetic girl strikes a pose while floating down to the street, encouraging everyone to participate and fight their way to the top of the hero election. Looks up at the commotion with disinterest, muttering to himself that he has absolutely no need for things like fame or fortune. He clenches his fists and declares with absolute conviction that the only thing he is determined to obtain is a quiet and peaceful life. The capital city is currently swirling with the ambitions and hopes of powerful warriors who have gathered from all over the world to compete. It is said that the last one standing will receive the title of hero from the king himself, along with the immense authority to rule the nation. While news of the fierce battles broadcasts across the city, accidentally trips in an alleyway and is coldly told by a passerby that his presence is a nuisance. The dark-haired stranger looks down at the fallen goblin and asks if he is a participant, speculating if this is the story of a monster who eventually becomes a demon king. The young man, identified as the magic tool user, holds up a screen showing the exact footage of defeating the thugs. He tells the goblin that if he doesn't leave the capital, he will surely be hunted down and offers to help him in exchange for something. Takes a photo with a small camera and explains that he recorded the entire fight with his visual memory device. The girl from the balcony, who is also the ambassador, smiles mischievously as she holds the device and claims that the election committee would be very interested in seeing a defenseless opponent being beaten up. She leans in close to with a flirtatious expression and asks if they should continue this little charade, calling him by name with a heart in her voice. Looks back and forth between them in panic, completely overwhelmed by the sudden attention and the threat of being exposed. Stares at the boy with a cold, calculating gaze, causing him to flinch and step back nervously. The goblin child realizes he is in trouble and tries to make a run for it but leaps over the railing with surprising agility to cut off his escape. He lands silently behind the boy and remarks that protecting a monster is a foolish thing to do, implying that his actions were abnormal. The girl calls out to the frightened child from behind, her playful demeanor suggesting that they are not done with him yet. Glares at the girl with annoyance, asking if she is really going to continue with this charade right now. The girl, identified as the magic tool, ignores him and leans over the railing to introduce herself too, calling out to him with a friendly smile. She compliments the goblin on his earlier actions, thanking him for helping them out and telling him not to worry about it. is confused by her gratitude but accepts it, telling her that he has no money to give her as thanks. Waves off his offer and laughs, saying she isn't after his money but rather wants him to test something for her. She proudly displays a massive sword-like object called the LRBB, explaining that it is a combat magic tool she created herself. The magic tool jumps down from the bridge with impressive grace, telling to watch closely as she demonstrates her invention. She explains that magic tools are machines powered by magical energy, developed around 300 years ago to greatly advance human civilization. Activates the weapon, causing steam to hiss out as she states that pouring magic into it allows the user to wield power similar to actual magic. She turns to the goblin with a bright smile and asks him to test it out, reasoning that since monsters possess far more magical power than humans, he would be the perfect candidate. Leans in with a friendly, slightly teasing smile to ask if the trembling boy is okay, causing the terrified goblin to stammer out a nervous affirmation. She leans casually against the railing and reminds him that they are in the neutral district, leading to realize with relief that there are indeed humans willing to help monsters. The girl sincerely thanks him for his assistance earlier, but when looks shocked by her gratitude, she waves it off and tells him not to worry about it. He hurriedly explains that he has no money to offer as a reward, but she simply laughs and clarifies that she isn't looking for financial payment. Her expression turns eager as she asks if he would be willing to test something for her, leaving the goblin child confused as to why she would ask him specifically. She proudly displays a massive combat magic tool called the LRBB and introduces herself as the magic tool, noting that they hadn't properly introduced themselves yet. Hops down from the ledge with the heavy weapon, instructing him to watch closely as she explains that magic tools are machines powered by magical energy. She details how these devices were invented 300 years ago to help human society develop, functioning as everything from daily appliances to weapons like the one she holds. Breathing heavily, Thea explains that pouring magic into the device allows it to unleash power similar to spells, though the goblin looks on with concern at her obvious exertion. She admits with a strained smile that although she built it, human magic levels are insufficient to activate it, so she asks if he would try since monsters possess far more magical energy. Looks concerned as she admits she couldn't be much help, leaning back and wondering if the food is tasty. He smiles gratefully and replies that he hasn't eaten in days, so it is the most delicious thing he has tasted in a long time. The tilts her head in confusion, asking about the earlier incident where he gave the bread to the dog, wondering what that was about if he was starving. Explains that the dog gave him the bread first, but it was taken away by the men who bumped into him, so he simply returned the favor. His expression shifts to one of curiosity as she asks him what he came to this city for if that's the kind of person he is. The goblin child looks down sadly and admits he came looking for a place to live, revealing his vulnerability. Sighs deeply and confesses that he was rejected from every job and place to stay, leaving him penniless and exhausted after being harassed in the streets. However, he quickly cheers up and adds that he can't stay depressed in a neutral zone where there are also anti-monster factions, especially since there are kind people willing to help him. Smiles knowingly and tells him not to worry about it, dismissing his gratitude with a wave of her hand. She leans back with a relaxed expression and mentions that pursuing her dream of being a magic tool costs money, hinting at her own ambitions. Wipes his mouth and admits in a small, unsure voice that he failed to channel his power properly. She laughs off his apology, telling him not to worry about it and asking if the crepe was delicious. The goblin suddenly panics and realizes he has no money to pay for the treat, asking frantically about the cost. Just smiles, having already paid for it, and comments that is honestly really cute. He blushes and stammers, asking her not to tease him, but she insists she isn't teasing. The playfully muses that she wants to dress him up in girly clothes because he would definitely look adorable. Vehemently rejects the idea, shouting that he absolutely will not do something like that. He passionately declares that his ideal image is to become a manly and cool goblin, imagining himself looking tough alongside other goblins. Stares blankly at his fantasy, noting dryly that his interpretation of cool is quite different from most people's. She tilts her head back and remarks that for goblins, having narrow, sharp eyes and a large, prominent nose is apparently considered the pinnacle of coolness and cuteness. Laughs as admits he was surprised by the compliments since goblins are usually seen as having narrow eyes and large noses. She leans in closely and teases him again, asking if he actually hated being called cute. Turns away shyly and denies that he hated it, but admits that he feels embarrassed by the attention. She grins mischievously and declares that, once again, she thinks he is incredibly cute. The goblin child flinches in surprise as she calls out his name with a heart, looking shocked at her sudden familiarity. Laughs lightly, telling him not to tease her back, while stammers out a denial. She gestures towards the giant weapon, playfully imagining how adorable would look if she dressed him up like a girl. Vehemently rejects the idea, shouting that he absolutely will not do such a thing and questioning who the other person in her fantasy is. She leans against the railing and assures him that it would definitely suit him, despite his protests. Silently watches the carefree interaction from a distance, wondering if they should perhaps broadcast the recorded footage of fight on television. Casually suggests that he should enter the hero election with her, taking completely by surprise. Stares at her with wide, shocked eyes, clearly not comprehending why she would propose such a thing. The girl leans against the railing and points out that the election is being broadcasted across the entire nation. She reasons that if truly wants a peaceful life, broadcasting his desire for peace through the election would be the most effective way to reach everyone in the abyss. He looks at her with uncertainty as she adds that since he currently has no place to stay, this would be a good opportunity for him. He informs him that participants in the election are guaranteed food and lodging by the state, which shocks the homeless goblin. She leans in close with a sly smile, telling him that the situation is quite appealing for someone like him right now. Hesitates, pointing out that he is just a monster, but insists that they should do their best together regardless. She smiles brightly and declares that she needs him for her own goals, leaving the goblin flustered and confused. Sighs in resignation, stating that if insists on teaming up with her, he has no choice but to issue a challenge to them both for a hero election duel. Sneers at the goblin, admitting that whilst interest in peace is abnormal for his kind, it is precisely what makes him intriguing. Cries out in shock and frustration, asking why he is doing this, while stares up at the man in utter confusion. He declares that he will awaken's potential by making him fight, citing the election rules that forbid turning one's back on an enemy as grounds for disqualification. The magic tool user smirks coldly and threatens to broadcast the footage of beating up the thugs on television if the boy refuses to fight him now. Trembles with fear and drops to his knees, pleading with not to do it because it would ruin his chances of finding a peaceful life. Looks down at the terrified child without pity and tells him that if he doesn't want to be exposed, he must accept the duel. Steps in angrily, shouting that has no intention of participating in the election and should not be dragged into this. He ignores her protest and glares at the goblin, warning him not to make him regret sparing him earlier. The looks back at with a gentle smile and tells him that she understands his reluctance, but points out that he has no other choice. She reaches out and takes his hand firmly, telling him that she needs him and urging him to fight alongside her just this once. Explains that if multiple people try to channel magic into it, the conflicting energies could cause the device to break, much like mixing incompatible blood types. She hands the heavy weapon to the goblin child, asking if he can handle it, and he grimaces under its weight but agrees to try because it seems like an easy task. Channels his magic into the LRBB, causing it to activate with a burst of energy and a mechanical whir. Cheers happily, clasping her hands together and exclaiming that it worked, relieved that her invention is finally functional. The heavy sword suddenly becomes too much for the small goblin and he collapses onto the pavement, unable to support its weight any longer. Struggles on the ground, trying to lift the weapon while looks down at him with concern, asking if he is okay but also slightly amused by his clumsiness. She leans down with a teasing smile and tells him that he is truly cute, urging him not to make fun of her creation. A shadow falls over them as appears, declaring that he has officially registered their hero election duel and demands they begin immediately. looks up in annoyance as he activates a magical barrier around them, stating that he will not overlook them if they refuse to fight. Stares at the shimmering barrier in confusion, while scoffs at the idea that a mere technician with no combat experience thinks she can protect anyone with that heavy sword. Mocks interest in, claiming that her taste in allies is twisted if she finds a monster fascinating just because they met recently. He explains to the confused goblin that according to the election rules, turning one's back on an enemy results in immediate disqualification. The magic tool user warns them that he will not let them leave if they try to walk away, making it clear that he intends to fight. Trembles with fear as he realizes that he is being forced into a conflict despite his wish for a peaceful life. Smirks cruelly and asks if he should broadcast the footage of the goblin defeating the thugs on television right now to force his hand. The goblin child cries out in panic, terrified that his violent actions will be made public and ruin any chance he has of being accepted by society. Steps forward protectively, questioning why would involve when the boy clearly has no intention of participating in the election. He ignores her and glares at the goblin, warning him not to make him regret sparing him earlier. The turns to with a determined expression, telling him that she understands his reluctance but insists that he has no choice. She grabs his trembling hands and pleads with him to fight alongside her, declaring that she needs him to win. Feels a premonition that teaming up with her might open a path to his dream if he goes along with it. However, he hesitantly points out that his magic power might not be enough to wield the magic tool properly. Takes his hand firmly, noticing his small, trembling fingers, and reassures him that the match has already been accepted, so they must go immediately. As they stand on the street, suddenly freezes with realization upon seeing the group of thugs from earlier approaching them. The large thug laughs loudly, mocking the goblin's idea of a cool and manly appearance as a complete misinterpretation. His companion joins in the ridicule, contrasting large, round eyes and small nose with the traditional goblin features of sharp eyes and a big nose. One of the thugs sneers that is the complete opposite of what a goblin should be, calling him cute instead of cool in a derogatory tone. Steps forward with a cheerful smile and tells the men that she needs them for something important. The thugs look confused as she continues to smile, completely unfazed by their intimidating presence. Watches nervously as she grips his hand, wondering what she is planning to do with these dangerous men. Raises his hand high in the air and loudly asks to be allowed to participate as a member of his party, wondering aloud if he can truly become a hero. He imagines a difficult future where they are bruised and battered, realizing that if he is with this woman, he might actually be able to stand his ground and face the challenges ahead. The goblin child's eyes widen with intense clarity and focus as he solidifies his resolve to take this dangerous path. Steps forward with fierce determination, declaring that he has decided to fight for the sake of his dream.